The air inside the first-class cabin was cold, but the grip of the plastic zip ties cutting into 17-year-old Maya's wrists burned like fire. She wasn't shouting anymore. She was gasping, her vision blurring as the flight pursuer loomed over her with a smug, victorious sneer. To the crew of Flight 402, Maya was just a stowaway thug in a hoodie who stole a seat meant for the elite. They didn't care about her tears. They didn't check her ID. And they certainly didn't realize that the man sleeping in Suite 1A, the man they were terrified to wake up, was the only person who could end their careers with a single phone call. When Maya's eyes rolled back and her body went limp, the silence that followed was deafening, but it was nothing compared to the noise that was about to start when her father opened his eyes. The humid friction of a New York summer clung to Maya as she navigated the jet bridge at JFK. It was that sticky, suffocating heat that made your clothes feel like a second heavier skin. She pulled the oversized gray hoodie tighter around her frame, disappearing into the fabric. To anyone passing by, she looked like any other teenager, messy bun, Beats headphones resting on her neck, and frayed denim jeans. She didn't look like she belonged in the Priority 1 lane. Maya clutched her boarding pass, a crisp piece of cardstock stamped with the gold Royal Atlantic insignia. Seat 2F. A window seat in the updated first-class suites. It was a graduation gift, a well done for surviving finals and getting into Columbia, combined with a reluctant invite to join her father, David Sterling, on a business trip to London. David had boarded 30 minutes earlier, whisked away through a VIP entrance for high-value flyers. He hated the fanfare, but as the CEO of Sterling & Co., a logistics giant that essentially kept Royal Atlantic's cargo division profitable, he rarely had a choice. Maya, however, had insisted on grabbing a pretzel from the terminal. She wanted to be normal for 10 minutes before being shoved into the bubble of champagne and hot towels. She stepped onto the plane. The transition was instant from the chaotic humidity of the jet bridge to the sterile, pine-scented air conditioning of the cabin. Boarding pass, a voice clipped. Not asked, demanded. Maya looked up. Blocking the aisle was Patricia. Her number tag read Patricia, Senior Purser, but her eyes read Gatekeeper. She was a wall of perfectly pressed navy polyester and hairspray. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes, it stopped at her mouth, tight and suspicious. "Right here," Maya said, a voice soft. She held out the card. Patricia didn't take it. She just looked at it, then looked at Maya, then looked back at the card. Her gaze lingered on Maya's sneakers, scuffed limited edition Jordans that Patricia likely assumed were knockoffs. "This is the first-class line, sweetheart," Patricia said, her volume slightly louder than necessary. "Economy boarding is in 20 minutes. You need to wait at the gate." "I know," Maya said, trying to keep her cool. "My seat is 2F, Patricia scoffed, a sharp exhalation of air through her nose. She snatched the ticket from Maya's hand, her manicured nails scraping Maya's skin. She held it up to the light as if checking for a watermark on a counterfeit bill. "Seat 2F, Patricia read, her tone dripping with mock confusion. "Full fare, bought yesterday." She lowered the ticket and leaned in, invading Maya's personal space. "Look, I don't know who you think you are or whose ticket you swiped from the lounge, but this doesn't fly with me." "Literally, it's my ticket," Maya said, her heart starting to hammer against her ribs. She hated confrontation. She had her father's eyes, but she had her mother's anxiety. "My name is on it, Maya Sterling." "Sterling," Patricia laughed. It was a dry, brutal sound, like the silver, cute. "Look, I'm going to ask you once to turn around and step off my aircraft before I call Port Authority." Behind Maya, a line of passengers was forming. A man in a bespoke suit cleared his throat impatiently. "What's the holdup?" "Just a minor security issue, Mr. Henderson," Patricia cooed, her voice instantly transforming into a customer service melody. She turned back to Maya, her face dropping the mask. "Move, now, Tete." "I'm not moving," Maya said, her voice shaking but her feet planted. "Check the manifest. I'm supposed to be here." Patricia's eyes narrowed into slits. She snapped her fingers at a junior flight attendant, a young man named Greg, who looked terrified of her. "Greg, get security on the line. We have a non-compliant passenger attempting to breach the premium cabin." "But Patricia," Greg whispered, glancing at his tablet. "Mycia Sterling on the manifest. Maybe we should just—" "Do not tell me how to do my job, Gregory." Patricia snapped. "I have been flying this route for 20 years. I know what a first-class passenger looks like, and I know what a scammer looks like." She's stalling until the doors close. "Get security." Maya felt the heat rising in her cheeks. Everyone was staring. The man in the suit, Mr. Mart. Henderson looked at her with pure disgust. "Can you just leave?" he muttered. "Some of us have meetings." "I'm not leaving my seat," Maya whispered, gripping her phone. She thought about calling her dad. He was just 50 feet away, probably in Suite 1A, but he always wore those heavy, noise-canceling headphones the second he sat down. He was likely asleep or reviewing contracts. And frankly, Maya wanted to handle this. She wanted to prove she wasn't just a child who needed Daddy to fight her battles. She stepped forward, trying to squeeze past Patricia to get to her seat. That was the mistake. Patricia moved with the speed of a viper. She grabbed Maya's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "You do not touch me. That is assault on a flight crew member." "I didn't touch you," Maya cried out, pulling back. "Let go. Stop resisting." Patricia yelled, playing to the audience. She twisted Maya's arm behind her back, forcing the girl into the galley wall. "Restrain her, Greg. Now." "Not. Art." Greg, panic-stricken and trained to follow the Perseus' orders, fumbled for the plastic zip-tie restraints kept in the emergency kit. "I didn't do anything," Maya screamed, the pain in her shoulder blinding. "My dad is on this plane. He's in 1A. "Yeah, right," Patricia hissed into her ear. "And I'm the Queen of England." "You're done, little girl." The plastic cuffs bit into Maya's skin. They were zip ties specifically designed for unruly passengers, meant to be tight. But Greg, in his nervousness, had pulled them too tight. They cut off the circulation immediately. Maya gasped, a sharp, ragged intake of breath as her hands were secured behind her back. Patricia shoved her down onto the jump seat in the forward galley, right next to the cockpit door. "You sit there and you shut up until the marshals get here. I'm having you arrested for assault and attempted stowaway." The humiliation was worse than the pain. The first-class passengers filed past her. Mr. Henderson shook his head, muttering about youth these days. A woman with a Pomeranian in her purse looked at Maya as if she were a piece of luggage left in the aisle. No one asked if she was okay. No one asked why a teenage girl was crying. They just saw the handcuffs and the angry flight attendant and made their assumption. Maya's head began to swim. She had a condition, vasovagal syncope. It was triggered by extreme stress and pain. When her blood pressure dropped, it dropped hard. "My hands," Maya whispered, her head lolling forward. "Please, they're too tight. I can't feel my fingers." "Save the drama," Patricia said, turning her back to organize the champagne flutes. "You should have thought about that before you tried to sneak onto a $5,000 flight." "I can't breathe. I can't breathe," Maya wheezed. The cabin started to spin. The edges of her vision turned black, like ink spilled in water. Greg looked concerned. He stepped closer. "Patricia, she looks pale, like really pale." "She's faking it, Greg. It's the oldest trick in the book. Play the victim so we let her go, then she bolts for the exit." Patricia popped the cork on a bottle of Dom Perignon. "Ignore her." But Maya wasn't faking. The lack of blood flow to her hands, combined with the sheer panic of the assault, caused her heart rate to bottom out. Her head slumped against the bulkhead. Her breathing became shallow, then barely there. "Dad," she whimpered, the word barely audible over the hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power. Then she went limp. Her body slid sideways, held up only by the seatbelt Greg had strapped across her chest. Her head knocked against the metal wall with a sickening thud. The sound made Greg jump. "Patricia!" Patricia turned around, annoyed. She looked at the slumped figure of the girl. "Oh, for God's sake, get the smelling salts. If she thinks playing dead is going to work, she's not playing." Greg yelled, breaking protocol. He rushed to Maya, checking her pulse. It was thready, weak. Her skin was cold and clammy. "She's out cold. Patricia, we need to call the paramedics back. We need to cut these ties. Don't you dare cut those restraints," Patricia warned, pointing a finger. "She is a security threat. If she wakes up swinging, that's on you." "She's unconscious," Greg shouted. The commotion finally drew the attention of the cockpit. The pilot, Captain Miller, opened the door. "What is going on out here?" Miller demanded. "We're 5 minutes from pushback. Why are we shouting?" "Stowaway, Captain," Patricia said, smoothing her skirt. "Became combative. We restrained her. Now she's feigning a medical emergency." Captain Miller looked at the girl slumped in the jump seat. He frowned. "She looks like a kid." "A criminal kid," Patricia corrected. Suddenly, the heavy velvet curtains separating the galley from the first-class suites rustled. It wasn't a gentle movement. It was a forceful tear, the curtain rings rattling violently against the rod. A man stepped into the galley. He was tall, wearing a charcoal cashmere sweater and loose linen trousers. He had an aura of authority that made the air in the small space feel instantly heavier. He held a pair of Bose headphones in one hand and an iPad in the other. He looked annoyed, disturbed from his pre-flight peace. "I specifically asked," the man said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "for no disturbances until we reached cruising altitude. I can hear you screaming from the front suite." Patricia's face went white. She knew this man. Not personally, but she knew the code on his ticket. "BIP. Do not disturb. Global Services. Mr. Sterling," Patricia stammered, putting on her best smile. "I'm so terribly sorry. We had a security breach. A young hooligan tried to force her way in. We're handling it." David Sterling didn't look at Patricia. His eyes were scanning the galley, looking for the source of the noise. His gaze drifted past the champagne cart, past the trembling Greg, and landed on the jump seat. He stopped. The iPad slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a loud crack, the screen shattering. He didn't blink. He stared at the sneakers, the scuffed limited edition Jordans he had bought for her birthday 2 weeks ago. Then he saw the gray hoodie, then the handcuffs, and finally the unconscious face of his daughter. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a bomb goes off. Patricia, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, chuckles nervously. "Don't worry, sir. The police are on their way to drag her off." David looked up. His eyes were no longer human. They were cold, dead voids of fury. He took a step toward Patricia, and for the first time in her 20-year career, she felt genuine, mortal terror. "You," David said, his voice barely a whisper, pointing at the girl. "You did this." "I." "Well, protocol dictates." Patricia's voice wavered. "Take them off," David roared. The sound was so loud it shook the galley walls. "Take them off her now." The shout that tore from David Sterling's throat wasn't just anger. It was the primal, terrifying sound of a parent who sees their child in danger. It bounced off the metal walls of the galley, freezing everyone in place. To take them off her now. Patricia, usually so composed, so sure of her authority within the metal tube of the fuselage, took a stumbling step back. She looked from the enraged man to the unconscious girl, her brain struggling to bridge the gap. "Mr. Sterling, the VIP in 1A, and this hoodlum?" It didn't make sense. The girl was wearing a hoodie. She was wearing sneakers. She didn't look like him. Sir, Patricia tried again, her voice trembling, grasping at the straws of her bureaucracy. Please, you need to step back. This passenger is a security risk. David didn't wait. He didn't argue. He lunged forward, not at Patricia, but at the galley counter. He swept a tray of crystal fruits onto the floor, the glass shattering with a violent crash that made Greg scream. David grabbed a pair of heavy-duty shears from the open emergency kit that Greg had left on the counter. Sir, you can't have a weapon. Greg shrieked, raising his hands. David ignored him entirely. He dropped to his knees beside the jump seat, his expensive linen trousers soaking up a puddle of spilled champagne. His hands, usually steady enough to sign billion-dollar merger deals, were shaking as he reached for Maya's wrists. When he saw the zip ties, his breath hitched. They were cinched so tight the skin around them had turned purple. The plastic was digging deep into the soft flesh of her inner wrists, cutting off blood flow. "Oh, God, Maya," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Baby, I'm here. Dad's here." With surgical precision, he slid the blade of the shears under the plastic loop, careful not to nick her skin, and squeezed. The plastic snapped with a loud crack. Maya's arms fell limp to her sides. The angry red welts left behind were stark against her skin. David tossed the shears aside. They clattered loudly against the cockpit door and cupped his daughter's face. Maya, wake up," he commanded softly, tapping her cheek. "Greg, get me water. And a wet towel. Now." "That's what I—" Greg didn't look at Patricia for permission this time. He scrambled, grabbing a bottle of Evian and ripping open a packet of hot towels, frantic to be helpful. "Is she breathing?" Captain Miller asked, stepping out of the cockpit fully now, his hat in his hand, looking down with growing horror. "Barely," David hissed, not looking up. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. "Her pulse is thready. She has a condition. Vasovagal syncope. Stress triggers it. If her heart rate drops too low." He trailed off, the threat hanging in the air. He took the cold water bottle Greg offered and pressed it to Maya's neck and forehead. "Come on, kiddo. Come back to me." A low groan escaped Maya's lips. Her eyelids fluttered. "That's it," David soothed, brushing a stray lock of hair from her sweaty forehead. "I've got you. You're safe. Now, sure." Maya's eyes opened, unfocused and glassy. She blinked, trying to process the blurry figure in front of her. "Dad," she croaked, her voice dry and weak. "I'm here," David said, pulling her into his chest. He glared over her shoulder at the crew, his eyes burning with a cold blue fire. "My hands hurt," Maya whimpered into his sweater. I know," he whispered. Then the volume of his voice rose, projected directly at Patricia, who was now pressing herself against the exit door, as if trying to merge with it. "Why was my daughter handcuffed, Patricia?" The use of her name was like a slap. "I didn't know," Patricia stammered. Her face was ashen. She didn't have her ID out. She was trying to force her way into first class. She looked like what? David stood up, helping Maya to a sitting position but keeping a protective arm around her shoulders. He towered over the flight attendant. "Finish that sentence." "She looked like what?" Patricia opened her mouth, but no words came out. The unspoken bias hung heavy in the air. She looked like she didn't belong. She looked poor. She looked black. "She had a ticket," David said, his voice dangerously calm. "I bought it myself. Seat 2F. Right behind me." "Did you ask for it?" She. Patricia looked at Greg for help, but Greg was busy studying the floor. "She handed me something, but I thought, sir, people try to sneak up here all the time. We have to be vigilant." Her behavior was aggressive. "Aggressive," Maya whispered, lifting her head. Tears were streaming down her face now. "I asked you to check the manifest. I told you my name. You grabbed me. You twisted my arm." David looked at the captain. "Captain Miller, is it?" Yes, sir, the pilot said, standing at attention. My daughter has a heart condition. Your purser just assaulted her, restrained her illegally, and caused a medical episode that could have killed her. David stated, as if reading a legal brief. I want the police here. Now. But not for her. He pointed a shaking finger at Patricia. For her. Patricia gasped. You can't be serious. I was doing my job. The captain has my back, don't you, Miller? Captain Miller looked at David Sterling, a man known in the aviation industry as the Logistics King, a man whose company controlled 40% of the freight contracts that kept Royal Atlantic from bankruptcy. Then he looked at the bruised wrists of the teenage girl. Miller took a deep breath. Patricia, he said, his voice grave. Did you check the manifest before you restrained her? I didn't have time. She was pushing past me. So you restrained a minor without verifying her status? Miller asked, his face hardening. She didn't look like a Sterling. Patricia shouted, her composure finally snapping. Look at her, and look at him. The silence returned. It was uglier this time. Patricia had said the quiet part out loud. David Sterling was white, Maya was black. It was a simple fact of their family, one they had navigated for 17 years, but hearing it used as a justification for violence in 2024 made David's vision go red. Get out of my sight, David whispered. Excuse me? Patricia blinked. Get off this plane, David said, before I throw you off myself. You can't order me off my own flight. Patricia screeched. I am the senior purser. I am in charge of this cabin. Not anymore, a new voice boomed. 2 Port Authority officers stepped onto the plane from the jet bridge, hands resting on their belts. Behind them were 2 EMTs with a stretcher. We got a call about a disturbance, the lead officer said, looking around the champagne-soaked galley. Who's the aggressor? Patricia straightened up, smoothing her skirt. She pointed a manicured finger at Maya. The girl in the hoodie. Assault, trespassing, and resisting crew instructions. Take her away. David Sterling stepped in front of Maya. He didn't raise his hands. He just stood there, an immovable object. Officer, David said calmly, if you touch my daughter, you will be making the biggest mistake of your career. The Port Authority officers paused. They were used to unruly drunks and belligerent Karens. They were not used to men who wore $5,000 sweaters and spoke with the quiet confidence of a Roman emperor. Sir, step aside, the officer said, though his hand hovered hesitantly over his handcuffs. The flight crew has jurisdiction here. If they say she's a threat, we have to remove her. Not you, de. Astolo oledoli abdam. She is a 17-year-old honor student who just graduated from high school, David said, his voice ringing with steel. She is a ticketed passenger in seat 2F. This woman, he gestured to Patricia, assaulted her because she didn't believe a black teenager could afford a first-class ticket. Look at her wrists. The EMTs pushed past the officers. Let us through, please. David stepped aside instantly for the medics. They knelt beside Maya, who was still trembling. One EMT, a kind-faced woman, took one look at the welts on Maya's wrists and gasped. Who did this? I did, Patricia said defensively. Standard restraint procedure. This isn't standard, the medic said, checking Maya's blood pressure. You cut off her circulation. Her pulse is erratic. We need to take her to the hospital for observation. She's in shock. Hospital. David's face paled. Is it that bad? She needs to be checked out, sir. The syncope episode combined with the trauma. We can't clear her to fly. David nodded. He turned to the officers. You heard the medic. She is the victim here. Now I want to file charges against this flight attendant for assault and battery on a minor. Patricia let out a high-pitched laugh. Charges? Against me? Officer, arrest this man for interfering with a flight crew. He's delirious. The lead officer looked at Captain Miller. Captain, it's your call. Who goes? Captain Miller looked at Patricia. He had flown with her for years. She was efficient, yes, but she was also mean. He'd seen her snap at passengers before, but never like this. Then he looked at David Sterling. He recognized the name now, Sterling & Co. They shipped millions of tons of cargo. If David Sterling pulled his contracts, Royal Atlantic would lose a third of its revenue overnight. But more importantly, Miller was her father. He looked at Maya, looking small and broken on the jump seat. "Officer," Miller said, his voice heavy, "the girl, the passenger, is not being charged." "What?" Patricia screamed. "Miller, are you insane?" "She attacked me. The cameras will show that, Patricia," Miller said quietly. He pointed to the small security dome in the galley ceiling. Patricia's face went slack. She had forgotten about the new cabin surveillance systems installed last month. "I want her off the plane," Patricia hissed, doubling down because she had no other choice. "I refuse to fly with a threat on board. It's her or me." David Sterling reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. "That's an excellent proposition," David said. He unlocked the phone and dialed the number from his favorites list. He put it on speaker. The line rang twice. "David?" a voice answered. It was a British accent, crisp and familiar. "I thought you were wheels up to London." "Everything all right?" The color drained from Captain Miller's face. He knew that voice. Every employee at Royal Atlantic knew that voice from the mandatory quarterly briefing videos. It was Sir Arthur Pendleton, the CEO of the airline. "Arthur," David said, his eyes locked on Patricia. "We have a problem. I'm currently on Flight 402 at JFK. We are not wheels up, and we won't be." "Why? Mechanical. Arthur asked, his tone sharpening. "Personnel," David said. "Your senior purser, a woman named Patricia, just handcuffed my 17-year-old daughter until she passed out because she didn't believe Maya had a first-class ticket." Dead silence on the other end of the line. "She what?" Arthur's voice dropped an octave. "Maya is currently being treated by EMTs on the floor of your galley," David continued, describing the scene with brutal clarity. "Her wrists are lacerated. She is in shock, and your purser is currently demanding that the police arrest my daughter." "David." Arthur sounded horrified. "Is Maya okay?" "No, Arthur. She is not okay, and neither is our contract. The threat landed like a nuclear warhead." "David, please," Arthur said, panic entering his voice. "Don't bring the business into this. We will fix this. Put Miller on the phone." David held the phone out to the captain. Miller took it as if it were a live grenade. "Sir," Miller said, his voice shaking. "Miller," Arthur's voice barked. "Is this true? Did your crew assault David Sterling's daughter?" There was an altercation, Sir Arthur. The purser felt there was a security threat, but it appears to have been a misunderstanding regarding the passenger's ticket." "A misunderstanding?" Arthur roared. "Since when does a misunderstanding involve handcuffs and a minor losing consciousness?" "Who is the purser?" "Patricia Evans, sir. Remove her," Arthur ordered. "Immediately. Relieve her of duty. I want her escorted off the aircraft by the police. She is suspended pending an immediate investigation. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Miller said. Patricia stood there, mouth agape. She shook her head. "No, you can't do this. I have tenure." "The union give the phone back to David," Arthur commanded. Miller handed the phone back. "Arthur," David said. "David, I am mortified," Arthur said. "I am grounding that plane if I have to. I will have a personal medical team meet you. I will have a car take you wherever you need to go. Please, tell me what you need." "I need your purser arrested," David said coldly. "And I need everyone off this plane. My daughter isn't a spectacle for your first-class passengers to gawk at." "Done," Arthur said. "Cancel the flight, Miller." "Deplane everyone." David hung up. He looked at the police officers. The CEO of the airline just ordered her removal. You can arrest her for assault now. I'll provide the statement and the footage." The officers looked at each other, shrugged, and turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, let's go," the lead officer said, pulling out his handcuffs. "No!" Patricia shrieked as they grabbed her arms. "You can't arrest me. I was protecting the plane. This is reverse racism. This is unfair." As the cold steel cuffs, real ones, this time clicked around Patricia's wrists, the irony was lost on no one. She was dragged down the jet bridge, kicking and screaming, past the very line of economy passengers she had tried to protect the cabin from. David didn't watch her go. He was back on his knees, holding Maya's hand. "Come on, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "Let's go home." But as they stood up to leave, the drama wasn't over. The first-class cabin, which had been silent witness to the entire event, began to stir. Mr. Henderson, the man who had scoffed at Maya earlier, stood up. "Wait a minute," he said, blocking the aisle. "You cancelled our flight. I have a merger in London in 6 hours. You can't just cancel a flight because your daughter got her feelings hurt." David stopped. He looked at Henderson. He looked at the other passengers, the lady with the dog, the business executives who were now groaning and complaining about the delay, completely ignoring the injured girl being supported by the medics. David realized then that Patricia was just a symptom. The disease was the entitlement sitting in these leather seats. "My daughter," David said, his voice carrying through the cabin, "didn't get her feelings hurt. She got assaulted. And as for your merger—" David squinted at the man. "Henderson? Bob Henderson, with Apex Logistics?" Henderson blinked. "Yes. How do you know me?" "I'm David Sterling," he said. Henderson's jaw dropped. Apex Logistics was a subsidiary of a company Sterling & Co. was currently in talks to acquire. David Sterling was essentially his future boss's boss. "And I suggest," David continued, "that you find another way to London. Because if I hear one more word out of you, your merger isn't the only thing that's going to be cancelled." The walk from gate B12 to the VIP exit was usually a blur of anonymity for David Sterling. Today, it was a gauntlet. News of the JFK first-class incident had traveled faster than the fiber-optic cables burying the airport could carry it. By the time David, flanked by 2 apologetic airline executives and a team of private security guards, guided a shell-shocked Maya through the terminal, the atmosphere had shifted. People weren't just staring. They were filming. A passenger from economy, a 19-year-old TikTok influencer named Leo, who had been standing near the galley when the shouting started, had captured everything. He hadn't just filmed the arrest, he had filmed the initial confrontation through the crack in the curtains. He had filmed Patricia's sneer. He had filmed Maya's collapse. And he had filmed David Sterling, the billionaire titan of logistics, tearing the airline apart with a single phone call. The video captioned, "Airline Karen nearly kills billionaire's daughter, justice for Maya Royal Atlantic," had been live for 20 minutes. It already had 2 million views. As they moved through the concourse, the whispers were audible. "That's him. That's the dad. Look at her wrists. Oh my God, they're wrapped in gauze. Is that the girl? She looks so young." David kept his arm tight around Maya's shoulders. She was wearing his sunglasses now, trying to hide her swollen eyes. The adrenaline had crashed, leaving her trembling and exhausted. The painkillers the EMTs had given her were dulling the throbbing in her arms, but the shame, the sticky, hot shame of being treated like a criminal in front of hundreds of people, was still burning her skin. "Just keep walking, sweetheart," David murmured, shielding her from a particularly aggressive paparazzo who had somehow breached the security perimeter. "Don't look at them. Look at me." "Everyone knows," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "Dad, everyone saw me pass out." "They didn't see you pass out," David corrected firmly. "They saw a bully hurt you, and now they're watching that bully get what she deserves." He was right. Back in the secure holding room of the Port Authority precinct, Patricia Evans was sitting on a cold metal bench. The handcuffs were still on. The polyester blazer she had worn like armor for 20 years was wrinkled and stained with sweat. She wasn't scared yet. She was indignant. She was still operating under the delusion that this was a misunderstanding that could be fixed with a call to her union rep. "You can't keep me here," she snapped at the officer processing her paperwork. "I have rights. I was maintaining the safety of the aircraft. That man Sterling, he threatened me. He's the one who should be in cuffs." But the officer, a weary sergeant named Diaz who had seen the TikTok video 5 times already, didn't even look up from his computer. "Ms. Evans," Diaz said flatly, "you are being charged with aggravated assault on a minor, false imprisonment, and reckless endangerment. The district attorney is already on the phone. They aren't looking to cut a deal." "The DA?" Patricia scoffed. "Please, it's a minor scuffle. The airline will kill this story. Royal Atlantic protects its own." Diaz finally looked up. He turned his monitor around. "Have you seen the news, Patricia?" Mal. On the screen was a CNN breaking news banner. "Logistics joint stirs Norlichting and Suspenscore contractats with Moriel. Atlant fu somads all at once, with concht ors dolteri Atlantic fo storched, ansiostat." Patricia's mouth went dry. "And," Diaz continued, scrolling down, "the FAA has launched an immediate investigation into your conduct. The CEO, Sir Arthur Pendleton, just released a statement. He called your actions abhorrent and criminal. You're not just fired, Miss Evans. You're radioactive." For the first time, the reality punched through her narcissism. The walls of the small room seemed to close in. She wasn't the powerful gatekeeper of the sky anymore. She was just a woman in a holding cell who had made a mistake that cost $1 billion. Meanwhile, at the private hospital suite where Maya was being evaluated, the fallout continued. Mr. Henderson, the impatient executive who demanded the flight continue, was currently sitting in the Delta Sky Club, frantically trying to rebook his flight to London. He checked his email, expecting the merger documents from Apex Logistics. Instead, he found an email from his own Human Resources Department. Subject: immediate suspension. Mr. Henderson, in light of the viral footage surfacing from Flight 402, specifically your comments regarding the victim and your dismissal of a medical emergency to prioritize your meeting, the board has voted to suspend you effective immediately, pending a conduct review. Sterling & Co. has informed us they will not acquire a company whose leadership displays such a profound lack of ethics. Henderson dropped his phone into his gin and tonic. He had lost his job, his merger, and his reputation, all because he couldn't wait 10 minutes for a girl to get medical help. Karma wasn't just hitting back, it was clearing the board. 3 months later, the deposition room in the high-rise law firm of Cromwell & Sullivan was sterile, cold, and smelled faintly of lemon polish and fear. Patricia sat on one side of the mahogany table. She looked different. The hairspray was gone, leaving her hair flat and graying. She had lost weight. Her eyes darted nervously around the room. Next to her was a court-appointed lawyer who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Opposite her sat David Sterling. He looked immaculate in a navy suit, his face unreadable. Next to him was Maya. She wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the heat of the building. She was there to give her victim impact statement. Patricia had tried to settle. She had begged the airline to cover her legal fees. They had refused. She had tried to sue for wrongful termination. No lawyer would take the case. Now she was facing a civil suit from the Sterlings that threatened to take whatever pension she had left. Ms. Evans, David's lawyer, a shark of a woman named Elena Vance. Wait, no Vance. "Let's go with Sylvia Ross," began. "In your police statement, you claimed my client, Maya Sterling, was belligerent and refused to show her ticket. Is that correct?" "Yes," Patricia said, her voice thin. "She was resisting. We have the cockpit voice recorder audio," Sylvia said, sliding a tablet across the table. "And the passenger video." At timestamp 10,004 a.m., Maya Sterling says clearly, "My name is Maya Sterling. Please check the manifest." At 10:05 a.m., you can be heard saying, "I don't care who you are. You don't belong here." Sylvia paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Do you deny saying that, Miss Evans?" Patricia gripped her hands together. "I was stressed. It was a long week." "Was it a long week when you applied the zip ties?" Sylvia asked. "The medical report states that the ligatures were applied with enough force to cause nerve damage in her ulnar nerve. Maya has been in physical therapy for 8 weeks to regain full sensation in her pinky and ring finger. Was that necessary for safety?" Patricia looked at Maya. For the first time, she really looked at her. She didn't see a thug in a hoodie. She saw a girl with terrified eyes who was squeezing her father's hand so hard her knuckles were white. Patricia crumbled. "I made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to serve the meal," David spoke up. His voice was quiet, but it commanded the room. "What you did was profiling. You looked at my daughter and decided she was less than. You decided she was a target." David leaned forward. "I want you to know something, Patricia. I didn't sue you for the money. You don't have enough money to pay for the therapy my daughter needs. I sued you so that every time you apply for a job, every time you try to rent an apartment, every time someone Googles your name, this is what they see. I want you to be the example." The judgment came down 2 weeks later. Patricia was found liable for damages totaling $1.2 million. Since she couldn't pay, her assets were seized. Her condo in Queens, her car, and her retirement savings were liquidated. She avoided jail time only by pleading guilty to a lesser misdemeanor charge, but she was placed on 5 years of probation and required to complete 2,000 hours of community service. But the real punishment wasn't legal. It was social. Patricia couldn't walk down the street without being recognized. She was the face of intolerance. She was the plain Karen. She applied for jobs at retail stores, call centers, even fast food chains. But background checks are unforgiving. 6 months after the incident, the former senior purser of Royal Atlantic, who used to sip leftover champagne in the galley and judge passengers' shoes, was working the night shift at an Amazon fulfillment center in New Jersey. She spent 10 hours a night packing boxes, standing on concrete floors, her own wrists aching from the repetitive motion. She was supervised by a 20-year-old manager who docked her pay if she took a bathroom break longer than 3 minutes. She was invisible. She was tired. And every time she saw a plane soar overhead, a pang of regret so sharp it felt like a knife twisted in her gut. 1 year later, the morning sun over London Heathrow didn't just shine. It seemed to pierce through the heavy glass of Terminal 5 with a deliberate cleansing brilliance. It washed over the polished terrazzo floors, the bustling coffee kiosks, and the endless stream of travelers, illuminating a world that had, in quiet but significant ways, shifted on its axis. Maya Sterling stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of the first-class lounge, looking out at the tarmac. A year ago, the sight of a Royal Atlantic livery, the deep navy tail fin with the silver crown, would have sent a spike of cortisol shooting through her veins. It would have made her breath hitch, her hands shake, and her vision blur. But today, she didn't look away. She watched a massive Airbus A350 taxi toward the runway, her gaze steady, her expression contemplating not the metal machine, but the journey she had taken to get back here. She was 18 now, a sophomore at Columbia, and she looked it. The oversized gray hoodie that had been her armor and her target was gone. In its place, she wore a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white t-shirt and dark denim, an outfit that walked the line between student comfort and young professional power. Her hair wasn't in a messy bun. It was braided back in intricate proud rows that framed a face which had lost its baby fat and gained a steely resolve. David Sterling stood a few feet behind her, watching his daughter with a mixture of fierce pride and lingering vigilance. He held two flat whites in his hands, the steam curling into the air. He had aged a bit in the last 12 months. There were new silver streaks in his beard, earning him the nickname the Silver Wolf in the logistics world. The war he had waged against Royal Atlantic hadn't been just a legal battle. It had been a crusade. He hadn't stopped at Patricia. He had dismantled the board of directors, forced the resignation of Sir Arthur Pendleton, and implemented a zero-tolerance bias training program that was now the industry standard across 3 continents. But all of that, the lawsuits, the press conferences, the viral fame, mattered less to him than the fact that Maya was standing here, voluntarily, about to board a plane. "You ready?" David asked, stepping up beside her and offering the coffee. Maya took the cup. Her fingers brushed his. On her wrists, if you looked closely under the bright airport lights, you could still see them faint, silvery lines where the zip ties had bitten too deep. They were no longer angry red welts. They were part of her history now, like a tattoo she hadn't asked for but had learned to carry. "I'm ready," Maya said. Her voice wasn't the whisper it had been in that galley. It was rich and grounded. "It's just a plane, right?" "It's just a plane," David agreed, though they both knew it was more than that. It was the scene of the crime. They left the sanctuary of the lounge and headed toward the gate. The walk was different this time. A year ago, Maya had felt invisible until she was spotlighted by aggression. Now she felt seen, but the gaze of the airport had changed. As they approached the gate for Flight 101 to New York, the changes were visible. There were new signs at the counter. "Respect is our priority. Abuse of any kind will not be tolerated." The staff behind the podium weren't the harried, dismissive gatekeepers of the past. They were alert, diverse, and meticulously polite. "Boarding pass, please," the gate agent said. A numbtag read Sarah, and she smiled with genuine warmth. Not the plastic customer service grimace Maya remembered from Patricia. Maya handed over her phone with the digital pass. Sarah scanned it. The machine beeped a soft, affirmative green. "Ms. Sterling," Sarah said, glancing at the screen and then up at Maya. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, not the salacious recognition of a viral video watcher, but the respectful acknowledgement of someone who knew the history. "Welcome back. We have your preferred meal selection confirmed. And," she paused, lowering her voice slightly, "I just wanted to say, the new training modules? The ones your father's team helped implement. They're really good. Thank you." Maya blinked, surprised. "You're welcome," she said softly. "Seat 1A is ready for you," Sarah added professionally. "Actually," Maya smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I'm in 2F today. My dad is in 1A. I like the window on the right side." David chuckled as he scanned his own pass. "She likes to see the city on the approach. I just want to sleep." They walked down the jet bridge. This was the hardest part, the transition zone. The humid, enclosed air of the tunnel usually triggered the flashback, the smell of jet fuel and industrial carpet. Maya felt her heart rate tick up, a physiological phantom of the panic attack that had nearly killed her. "Breathe," she told herself. "In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. She wasn't that scared little girl anymore. She was a pre-law student who had spent the last year interning with the NAACP. She had turned her trauma into a syllabus. She was writing a paper on the legal ramifications of implicit bias in commercial transit. She wasn't walking into a trap. She was walking into a case study. They stepped onto the aircraft. The lighting was soft, amber, and welcoming. The air smelled of lavender and fresh linen, not stale stress. Standing at the galley entrance wasn't a wall of judgment, but a man named James. He was the new chief purser for the fleet, handpicked under the new administration. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Sterling," James said, nodding to them. He didn't block the aisle. He stepped back, opening the space, using body language that was welcoming rather than confrontational. "It is an absolute privilege to have you flying with us. If there is anything you need, anything at all, you let me know." "Thanks, James," David said, patting the man on the shoulder. Maya moved to seat 2F. She placed her bag in the overhead bin. She sat down in the wide leather seat. Now nothing. It was the same configuration as that day, the same luxury that Patricia had decided she didn't deserve. Maya ran her hand over the armrest. She remembered the cold feeling of the floor. She remembered the darkness closing in. But then she looked up. She saw a young black couple boarding behind her, laughing as they found their seats in row 3. She saw an elderly woman being helped with her bag by a flight attendant who was patient and kind. The tension that used to permeate the cabin, the silent, classist warfare of the boarding process, was gone. It felt lighter. David settled into 1A, directly in front of her. He stood up and leaned over the partition. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked. His eyes searched hers, looking for the cracks. Maya looked at him. She thought about Patricia Evans. She had heard the rumors, the probation, the bankruptcy, the lonely shifts at a warehouse in New Jersey. For a long time, Maya had wanted Patricia to hurt. She had wanted her to suffer the way she had suffered. But sitting here now, reclaiming her space, Maya realized that Patricia was just a ghost. A cautionary tale. Patricia's hatred had cost her everything: her career, her home, her dignity. Maya's pain, on the other hand, had forged something unbreakable. It had brought her closer to our father. It had given her a career path. It had forced an entire airline industry to change. Patricia was the past. Maya was the future. "I'm good, Dad," Maya said, and for the first time in a year she truly meant it. She pulled her Beats headphones out of her bag, the same ones, battered but beloved, and placed them around her neck. "Really good." "Okay," David nodded, his shoulders finally dropping an inch. "I'm right here." "I know," she said. The cabin doors closed with a heavy final thud. The outside world was sealed away. The engines began to spool up, a low, powerful vibration that hummed through the floorboards. James came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Royal Atlantic. Our flight time to New York will be 7 hours and 20 minutes. We ask that you sit back, relax, and let us take care of you." As the plane pushed back from the gate, Maya looked out the window. She watched the ground crew in their neon vests. She watched the terminal buildings slide away. The plane turned onto the active runway. The engines roared to life, the sound of raw power. Maya didn't close her eyes this time. She kept them wide open. She felt the thrust push her back into the seat, the G-force pressing against her chest, not like a weight holding her down, but like a hand lifting her up. The wheels left the tarmac. The vibration smoothed out as they cut through the lower atmosphere, climbing higher, banking sharply over the green fields of England. They punched through a layer of clouds and burst into the blinding, beautiful sunlight of the upper sky. Maya reached forward and tapped her father's shoulder. He turned around. "We're clear," she smiled, the sunlight illuminating the faint scars on her wrists, turning them into lines of silver. "Clear for takeoff." David smiled back, raising his coffee cup in a silent toast. The world had tried to ground her. It had tried to put her in the box, in cuffs, in her place. But as the plane leveled off at 35,000 feet, cruising toward a horizon that was endless and bright, Maya Sterling knew the truth. Her place was anywhere she wanted to be. And that brings us to the end of Maya and David's story. It's a powerful reminder that while karma can be a heavy hammer taking down people like Patricia who abuse their power, the real victory isn't in the revenge. It's in the recovery. It's in Maya getting back on that plane, changing the system, and refusing to let one person's prejudice clip her wings. What did you think of the ending? Do you think the airline's changes were enough, or should they have done more? And have you ever witnessed travel justice like this in real life? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that justice does exist. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a lottery winner and a jealous neighbor that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next video.